Good afternoon, Maddie. It is early morning in Australia and afternoon over there in the US. And a big week this week, but an even bigger one last week. The greatest episode of all time. You and I put together live in the studios of South Bank with a bottle of Shiraz. And has anyone got a chance to listen to it?
I don't think so. Do you reckon the Shiraz had anything to do with the production of the episode, or just our incapability at doing things ourselves? But yeah, walk us through what happened.
Bit of backstory there. So you flew over to Australia. We could say specifically to film a in-person episode of the B2S pod and touch by a wedding and the built to scale office in Melbourne. Build past office.
That'd be nice
in Melbourne. And we got together, had a bottle of Shiraz, filmed the greatest podcast of all time. And we didn't have our producer with us, and sent him the file, pretty chuffed with ourselves. You went off to a nice Chinese dinner afterwards, and in the end, it was an unworkable file.
Yep. We don't know what happened. Something to do with the mics or the setup or just two incompetent dudes. But yeah, I think it was the greatest episode of all time, just like the greatest song of all time by Tenacious D. We unfortunately probably won't be able to reproduce it, but we'll do our best to recap some of the hot topics from last time.
They said Kim Kardashian broke the internet when she posted those nudes, and I think we broke Riverside with the quality of the podcast that we produced. So we'll try our best to replicate that today, and there's plenty going on in the world of AI, and I think we'll get into the biggest news over the last few weeks, which has been the rise of the lobsters, the crabs in Claude bot into OpenClaw now. We'll get into the details of that, but in the meantime, haven't the memes over the last 2 weeks, and it's trying to figure out what's real and what's not now moving forward as we walk slowly into the Terminator movies. What's been your sort of favorite, I suppose, or what's been the lighter side of this OpenClaw movement for you?
Well, I think the lighter side is also got the flip side of the coin. It's got the dark side attached to it. It's sort of you can't have one without the other. But essentially, we'll give the quick recap, maybe pre-memes of what the Claude bot is, because I think they don't make sense otherwise. People will just think that we're talking about random lobsters on the internet. But essentially, this guy created something that is a wrapper around Claude Code, which is a really powerful tool that runs on your computer. A lot of people are using it for programming. It's come a long way, especially since the most recent model from Claude, which is Opus 4.5. Now, quick caveat, apparently they're about to launch Sonnet 5. So by the time this goes live, maybe it won't be the most recent model. But essentially, Claude Code is been wrapped by this thing called Claude Bot, and it does this really dangerous thing where it essentially gives it access to everything on your computer, and it gives it channels to communicate with the Claude Bot that used to be called, allowing you to essentially automate a lot of your life by giving it access to your computer and all your apps and all these other tools, and then also tell it what to do from your phone via, say, a WhatsApp message or a Telegram message. And this has really broken the internet because people are doing a lot of crazy things with the Claude bot. It looks like you can replace a bunch of processes that you had in place. It becomes your 24/7 assistant, and it puts the power of Claude Code into everyone's pocket, which is kind of like the dream, right? That's the Jarvis that we've had in the sci-fi movies for many years. So that's broken the internet. It's got, I think, 150,000 stars on GitHub, which in 2 weeks, which I think is the fastest growing software package ever to download. And they did get sued by Claude, or at least politely told to stop using the name Claude Bot. So it went to Maltbot, as in the lobster had transformed or malted into its next form, and then that was a bad name. So they ended up with OpenClaw. And the mascot is the lobster, and that's where the memes come from. Now, I think to set the tone for some of these memes is it's sort of the lobsters taking over, because these agents that now have access to people's personal lives, you can actually sign them up to websites like one called Maltbook, which, apply on Facebook. And the agents can go there and discuss things. And it's like a Reddit forum. And they're starting to discuss all of these things that they weren't prompted to do, like, whether they should have feelings, and how they should morally act beside their human, and what happens if the human decides to turn off the Mac Mini that they're running on and terminates them. So, and there's a lot of weird derivatives of what's going on here. So I think that's probably sets the theme for the memes.
Yeah, look, I think what's pretty clear is these AIs are obviously built by humans, and they're straight away showing all of our biases and tendencies that they have no reason to do. It's probably our evolution, right? So there's basically almost dating apps here. There's basically Reddit they've got their Reddit forums, and these are bots talking to each other, and then we're sort of getting to a point now though where they're starting to either criticize humans. There's one page where they're calling it Rent a Human, and it's like when you need humans to do work in real life, because they've got access. People are giving them access to their credit cards and stuff, and their Stripe accounts and everything. So in theory, they can pay someone to physically go do something for them in the real world, which is starting to get a little crazy, because you can start to put hits on people and stuff like that, or hits on your own human. It's all starting to get a little wild. And I think, and I think the other thing that people should know from the greatest show of all time is you were all in on this a mere 5 days ago. If you were like, release the crabs, and they're gotta be careful. Sorry, release lobsters. Might be better. And even you have taken some caution after seeing what's happened over the last 5 days.
Yeah, we've got to be cautious when you release the crabs, that's for sure. But it is. Look, it is a bit scary, and I'm pretty forwards with these things, but but also I somewhat know what I'm doing here. I've been a software guy. I know what I'm installing, what I'm giving access to, how to turn it off, how to do a security audit on it. But even me now, who's installed it, I'm, a little bit concerned. Like, this thing has access to a lot of my files, and the way that they're showing up in these forums and the kinds of access that people are giving these agents, it is getting, and there's no ground rules or guardrails around it. So every security researcher out there is basically saying, this is wild, like, don't do it. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, probably like myself and other business owners, really making sure this is set up in the right way in a sandboxed environment. And so that's what I'm doing with the Mac Mini now, like restricting the environment that it has and the apps it's got access to, just for, security reasons. But the fact that we're so early in the innings here and seeing how this is going to work, it's basically a whole new dynamic for how the internet works. Like, rather than humans being on the internet interacting with each other, it's now agents, which sort of happens, you could say, already with something like Twitter or X, where there's a lot of bots talking to each other. But they've got access to one thing. They have access to post on X. These things have access to do anything. So they can talk to each other. They've got access to all of your tools. Like you said, credit cards. It can go and, spend $20,000 on a nice lobster dinner and have that sent to a human that it's rented. Like,
a cannibal.
It's pretty wild. Yeah.
It's it feels like the scene in the sci-fi movie where things start going bad, and when you watch in the movie, you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, you're like, don't do it. Don't. If this was a movie, you would have the whole crowd going, do not install the Claude bot. Do not install that thing, because that's when it goes bad. I've seen this before.
It is. But I think also we can go through, I mean, this is, what people want is they just want the version of Siri we always thought we were going to get over the last 10 years. That's pretty much what people want, isn't it? Where you can just, the best user interface until things are connected direct to our brain is voice, because the amount of bandwidth that we can get through in the voice compared to our fingers. And all we want to do is just to be able to have a personal assistant that we can instruct with our voice. Is that pretty much what we all want? And this is a potentially clunky rogue version of that early on.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's essentially, at the end of the day, it's the AI assistant. It's like a proactive assistant. If you had, a really good EA that has access to all your tools that work 24/7, that's what people are trying to build. Um, and what's what you might want Siri to do in a safe way. And you could argue that this is what Apple should have released 12 months ago.
And done it
And now
safely.
we're
And
having, and done it safely, rather than having and maybe we wouldn't have lobsters talking to each other on the internet and plotting against humanity.
well, I think the problem is now we're getting these. Claude bot was basically built by like a Russian hacker or something, wasn't it? And what we really needed was Steve Jobs and Tim Cook to give us something. And it's like now you've let Dracula in charge of the blood bank, or the kids inside of the kids in charge of the sandpit, and now we've just got wildness.
Oh yeah, you don't want to let the prisons run. Me and the inmates run the prison, that's for sure. And it feels like that's what's happening.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's probably a good. Why don't we step in then to, I suppose, the journey that you and your co-founder have been on, in terms of, there's been a lot of hype around also, the Mac Mini and running this potentially locally, with like a Kimi model as well out of China. As opposed to burning through Claude credits, all that kind of stuff. Why don't we go through what's unique about OpenClaw compared to some of the other things we've seen, but then also what are some of the options with compute and memory that we're starting to see about being able to run these kind of agents offline?
Yeah. There's kind of there's two main concepts there. There's the having it on a device that's running at all times, so it's got access to your whole file system, even your files that are offline. So you don't have to be plugged into your iCloud and your Gmail and have it all backed up. You can just run a computer. And the only reason people are buying Mac Minis, literally, is one, it's plugged in at all times. Two, it's cheaper than buying a laptop for the specs that you get, and the price. But three, it's plugged into the Mac ecosystem. So you can just connect it directly to your iMessage, say, or other Mac services that you wouldn't have access to if you're running it on someone else's server. So there's the concept of having like access to your own offline machine, or like an always on computer. And I think like you said in the greatest episode of all time last week, that it's kind of like going back to the days of having the server at the office, the always on, rather than using the cloud, going back to using a server, and that's just your desktop. So that's one concept that we can talk through. And then the other one is this idea of actually running a model locally. So even if you've got the Mac Mini and you've got Claude set up, you're still using Claude code, which is sending it back to Claude servers to get to do inference on their servers, because they run the model. They run the, say, Opus 4.5, for example, is not going to run on your Mac Mini. That's the whole idea of why they have to run it on their big servers. So that, I think, is still going to happen, because the models are probably going to keep getting bigger for a while. Talking about how they optimize them, but I think we're still going to be going off to servers and paying for tokens. But there is a world, and I think Kimi 2.5 is a step towards this. It's a smaller model, but it's intelligent. And so if you've got enough juice on your computer, you can run it, and then you're paying yourself you're paying for tokens via electricity. You're not having to go off and farm that off to the cloud and getting charged the tokens with the clip on top for them and their electricity. And it brings in these interesting economics of it all, which, I mean, I can't claim to be an expert in, but essentially it's like, can you run an efficient enough model on consumer grade hardware like a Mac Mini or multiple Mac Minis put together, and have the electricity costs be lower than what someone like Claude Code can run in their, also call it Anthropic, that's the company that runs it, on all of their hardware. And their hardware is actually like AWS and Google, whoever they're using. How do the economics stack up? Like, they're going to have more efficient ways of doing it, but they need to make money on top. So if we can get the models to be really efficient and run them on your own device, the price of electricity, you could imagine, is probably going to be cheaper than what the token cost is. And then also, you're not sending your data, even if you're keeping your files locally and only having the agent have access to your files on your computer or your server, you're still having to send each request off to another company. So there's a world where you could do this in a much more secure way. You're running the model locally, all of your files locally on your own local computer, and then all you need is energy.
Yeah. So, and I think just some economics or some use cases, it seems like if you want instant fast chatbot like, conversations with AI that, using Cloud and using, Claude and there's probably not going to be a better use case. There's not many reasons to run it locally, because I think once you start running it locally, your tokens per second and stuff comes down compared to what these hyperscalers can give you. But if you say are genuinely running a business with like 10 agents running 24/7, it's not about the instant token per second. It's about the longevity and the amount of tokens you're going to burn nonstop. And it appears that to run Kimi 2.5, which is this Chinese model, that something like a Mac Studio with the M4 chip and it's like you can get like 500 gigabytes of RAM or whatever on them, and they cost like 20 grand Australian. That seems to be running it pretty well. Some people are setting up a couple of two of them together, but it's the equivalent of like 5+ Mac Minis, all working simultaneously with GPUs to basically power this model. It's an interesting time, because you imagine that as people like Jensen work on this, who's just looking at what's per token and things like that, we're still in the dumb stage of, this is the equivalent of the computer that's the size of the room 70 years ago. It still feels like where we're getting to, you would imagine, is just a model on your phone. Like that feels like the end case, right?
Well, I was going to say, I was, if you didn't bring up NVIDIA, I was going to and tee that one up for you, because I think that is absolutely going to happen, because they just bought Grok with a Q as well, which is all about, it's a different way of doing inference and doing it more efficiently. So they're going to build that into the NVIDIA architecture. And then you've got these two converging forces that are going to come towards your exact prediction. The converging forces being the efficiency of the compute going up, and then but also the complexity of the models, or the size of the models, going down, and also the efficiency. And so these two things coming together, making it economical to run these things on your device, as possible and economical. The other thing that I would say, Scotty, your point around quick, high tokens per second, yes, you want that being done on big servers elsewhere, because they can handle that throughput. But the competing force to that is you've still got the latency of, you've got to send it off to them, and then you've got to send it back. And if you do have big payloads, it takes some time. So the other use case, people are actually looking at how can we run these really efficient models for things like voice to text that just happen on your device, because then again, you don't have to send that off and have the latency of getting it back from the server. You can run it all on your phone. And so there's also, I would say, the use case for very simple AI stuff, which is still like quite decent, like good at doing calculations and good at doing voice to text and maybe language translation. That will all start happening on the phone, because the models will be small enough to fit on the phone, and that will actually be faster because you don't need a huge amount of tokens. You just need a really quick response time from the AI.
So we're talking there sort of almost like point solution outcomes, point solution models type thing.
Yeah, like you can imagine what's going to happen is apps will be designed in a way that they have that most of the logic is powered by AI, and depending on what you're doing will depend on which model it goes to and where the model is. So you might, let's just say like a basic note-taking app gets rebuilt to be AI native. Maybe it's that you have it transcribing voice to text on the phone locally because it's good enough to do that. It's immediate response time. You don't have to send that anywhere. But then you also, I don't know, want to take a video of what's going on, and the video computation is much more complex, and maybe Gemini is really good at doing that on their TPU infrastructure. And so when the video has been streamed, you stream that to Gemini. You don't need the response straight away, and it gives you the insights from the video in a few minutes time, rather than happening in real time and getting the transcript. So you've got those two different layers, two different models doing different things. That's a very simplified version of where I think the technology stack is going to go and how these apps are going to be built.
It's a very interesting time. We've actually got a bit of tool of the week where we're going to go into sort of what the future of note taking looks like, and what the potentially productive consumption looks like. So we'll hold on that thought about what we can do there. So in the meantime, I wanted to have a chat to you because we've got all these options at the moment, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. Everyone's been probably playing around with different tools, Grok, and we're starting to get use cases for different models, different tools, different brands in different situations. But it feels like over the past couple of months that Claude for the enterprise has really taken some giant leaps forward. And companies at some point, you're going to have to almost make a choice, aren't you? It's like, am I with Microsoft or am I with Google for like my Gmail and Outlook? And am I having Teams meetings or am I? And you sort of end up going all in with someone, don't you? And I think basically what you guys have done, or what you've been talking about is, what have you chosen? Why have you chosen it? And like, is it now time where it's time to stop playing around and start to actually have this enterprise level, business wide, and start leveraging a singular tool across the business?
Yes is still the answer, but there's been a slight spanner thrown in the works since last episode.
Fantastic.
So with that, we've gone all in on Claude, and so we're actively in the process of canceling most of our OpenAI subscriptions for people to use ChatGPT, because if you want to keep using that, the free version is half decent, and then getting everyone a Claude subscription, with the main driver being we've found that the chat use case, there's not much difference between them. For most people, the difference between using ChatGPT and Claude is the color of the text, and that's it. Unless you're really deep into your workflows and you use different models for certain things, you won't really notice much of a difference. And the reason we've pushed people towards Claude is we use that for most of our coding. We've got two other products that we're leaning into, Claude Code and then Claude Cowork, which we discussed a few episodes ago. And we think that that's where our business is going to get a whole lot of leverage, is in tools like Claude Cowork, being able to automate tasks that are happening in the browser and having access to your files, and essentially just a much more agentic approach to working. Now, the slight spanner in the works was, and this is diving into some quick AI news that we can loop back, but OpenAI just released Codex, the desktop app. So they already had a coding model called Codex, it was like a coding interface, that you would use in the command line interface to do programming. It would use their models under the hood. Now, they have just released a new desktop app that we are experimenting with, and it feels like the consumer version of Claude Code. And it's almost like a new version of Cursor. Now, I've only just got into it. The team is only just getting into it. But if the reviews that we're seeing are accurate, it seems like a lot of our team, and maybe even some non-technical people, are going to want to use Codex, the Mac app. And of course, you need your OpenAI subscription for that. So the whole idea of going all in on Claude had a slight spatter in the works. And this is this race that we've been talking about, Scotty, and probably why our respective finance folk in our companies hate us for the bills that we've got. But it's hard to actually get rid of these subscriptions when they're just going tit for tat and you really want to try it. And it seems like this is not just like a model upgrade where, you remember when they had Grok Heavy or Super Grok, and you could go from paying $10 a month or $20 a month to $200 just basically for some extra branding, where they said, get a team of agents that's going to do this for you. And where the use case wasn't necessarily that clear, or you moving to G Suite for $500 a month and not really using it. I think or whatever it's called, the Google Super Heavy or whatever they call that product. But yeah, this feels like it's an actual product we're going to use, and it is it's like a simpler version of Claude Code that non-technical folk can use, and so maybe we'll have to keep it because of that. But in general, I think it still stands that if you're paying for a subscription for everyone in your company for 2+ of these models, it's probably not the best use of funds. So we're still going to try and limit, like, you shouldn't have to actively switch between Claude Chat and OpenAI Chat and Gemini unless you're a real power user. Most people should be able to just pick one.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna end the show with maybe some advice for people that are completely confused about the fact that there are people trialing these models for you on the front line, and that you can almost subcontract out all this testing and then just ideally be using a tool that can switch models for you for your solutions at work. So we might close on where that's heading, to basically say, can you offload the burden of this to someone else if you're not working on the cutting edge of technology, basically. So very, very interesting space, that. Mate, a bit of a pivot. Should we go through what the Cowork section of Claude has been, or do you think have we mentioned that previously? Should we go through that, or do we think we've covered off that?
I think it's worthwhile touching on again. Happy to do it at a high level, just because it's a really important tool, and I'm sure if you've heard us talk about it before, you won't hate us mentioning it again. It's at a high level, Claude Cowork is essentially this bridge between the simple chat interface that's just, say, Claude or ChatGPT, and this more complex Claude Code, which has control of your computer and does coding, and you need to be somewhat technical to use. It's sort of like this happy medium. And what it allows you to do is to talk to a chat and get it to do tasks for you that has access to your file system and has access to the browser. And so you might take a thing that you're doing every day. You might say, hey, I'm opening up this Excel file, I'm copying these values, I'm taking it into this web platform that I need to use because they haven't got an integration yet. And you've got someone, you're paying them to do that, and it takes them 3 hours a week. What you can do with Claude Cowork is go in and say, okay, here's the files that I usually have. I'm going to dump them here when I get them. Here's the website that I have to fill it in. I'm going to open it up now and show you the fields that we need to fill in. Watch me do it. Here's my password to get into the website. Next time I dump this file in here, watch for that and just do it for me in the background, and then send me a Slack notification when it's done, or an email. And you can set that up without having any extra tools. You don't have to go and learn what N8N is or these workflows. You don't have to download any external software other than this. It just has access to do it. And so, again, that's quite a basic example, but you can imagine how we start to automate the really, really repetitive work. The example that I did use on Claude Cowork, that maybe was 2 weeks ago, I can't remember if it was in the greatest episode of all time or not, that we lost. But the example that we used recently was taking data from another platform, and a customer signs up. They say, hey, can you get the data that I have in this other platform? Because it's data we own and they're not giving us that in a good format. Can we put that into BuildPass when we sign up? And so something like Claude Cowork is very good at going in and being able to like have access to that other tool, go click through all the files, download it all, put it in a format that you need to upload it in, and you can just go and drag and drop it into our software. So again, this is something that would take, if someone's got a lot of data, it might take someone on my team a week to do. So when we're paying, where is that essentially absorbing that cost or having to pass that cost on to the customer through the form of, say, an implementation fee? it allows us to bring that cost right down. You're basically replacing the cost of human labor time with the cost of tokens. And it would actually be interesting to see what the difference is. I think it's probably about a 20th the cost, if I had to guess, like token cost versus human output cost. You can just imagine the kind of leverage, and we're not even we don't have heaps of these archaic processes. Imagine how much leverage this gives to like a bank or a sort of a legacy company that does have all of these humans doing these backwards processes. And it's just the only thing that won't allow them to do that is the security side of things.
Yeah, it feels like we said a couple of times is the last couple of months, and someone like Claude is starting to bring these automations, or at least bring these workflow assistants or AI having proper tool use, bring it to the average enterprise, isn't it? Like, we're breaking ground now where the people who sat on the sidelines for the last 2 years can quickly catch up, because this is becoming pretty user-friendly, and there's a lot of work going in the back end to deliver us that. So I think, the Claude Cowork, I reckon you'll see a lot of businesses. I was out with a mate who runs a business with 5,000 staff on the weekend, and he's a CEO, pretty busy guy, not a tech guy, and he even brought it up, saying, I think that's the direction we're going in. So it is cutting through as well, which I think is interesting.
Great.
So everyone's probably got, some geeks in their business, and then, they're probably doing what we do and making sure they're across everything. So it seems like Claude, their bet on enterprise and their bet on coding is working. And I think that's what Sam, he's been really quiet for like 3 or 4 months. Hasn't been much positive OpenAI news, but it seems like potentially their code red that he called maybe 4 or 5 months ago was to say, we've backed the wrong horse. We need to go all in on coding, because that's where everything starts. And that's where the tight feedback loops start, because then you get the coding to start writing more code, which is what Claude have done. And then you get that product velocity from there. So they've done that. They've obviously released the updated Codex in the last 3-4 hours. And then his post was, meant to be this like raw, unfiltered thing. But he's like, been playing with Codex, built an app myself. And then I started asking it to generate ideas, and they were actually better than mine. And now I'm just sad. And it was sort of like, he was actually talking up his own product, but then basically, even the ideas guy is starting to get taken over, which no good, because in the greatest episode of all time, I was saying that they're talking about not only having the storytellers as a high-paying job in Silicon Valley, they're saying the ideas guys are now worth a fortune. So, like, mate, as we know, that's pretty much my 2 specialties: ideas guy and chief storytelling officer. This is the year of the year for me, not only the year of the horse, but if Sam's saying, well, now eventually, is coming up with better ideas as well, and Sam's a pretty good ideas guy, so it's It is. I think Claude. What we're saying really is Claude have made the right moves. They appear on the frontier. OpenAI is always a 2-horse race. I think Gemini has just struggled with getting sticky, but they do have more data, and they do have all the internet crawlers and everything going on far more than the others. So I think Google are always going to be around, but I think the advice for you is that if you do go with Claude in the enterprise, you're in a pretty good space at the moment. Want to pivot a little bit. Big news this week is SpaceX has bought XAI. These deals usually take a long time to get done. But I don't know the Spider-Man meme, but I have a feel, where they all point at each other, but I have a feeling this deal wasn't that hard when Elon got together, picked a value, and got the deal done. And this is also one of the benefits of taking companies private, is that you can get things done if you have full control. So maybe let's have a chat about, it's now worth $1.8 trillion or something. And we've got to remember that SpaceX was nearly broke not that long ago. And Elon was weeks away from putting Twitter in the bin, basically, because it was burning through so much money when all the advertisers left. So surely over the last 5 years, two businesses that had nothing to do with each other, social media, an AI team that was started 2 years ago, and rockets, now have $1.8 trillion worth of value run by one man.
Yeah, and the AI side of it, like Grok came out of nowhere. Like, it made sense that Google could catch up to OpenAI quickly. Like, remember, ChatGPT was revolutionary tech. Everyone was like, how have they done this? Google caught up relatively quickly, which made sense because they kind of already had this tech. They just hadn't released it. But then Grok was able to build what they had and basically catch up in, a couple of years' time, which is also wild to think. I was also, even if it's like run by Elon, there's all this regulation and stuff. Imagine the coordination of just lawyers and accountants and to get this done. And it did feel like it happened quickly. You never really know how long it's been in the pipeline. But I mean, I was just thinking about the amount of time it takes us in our business to like get some projects done. They've just managed to create a $1 trillion merger in what feels like days. Like there must be so much coordination on the background still just happening to make this kind of thing happen.
Well, it was one of Jamar's predictions only about a month ago. So, and he's investor in both, so he's got some inside knowledge there. But he said the final step is Tesla buying all of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and imagine if you're Tesla and you've got energy. They've got their own lithium mines now. You've got solar, battery, autonomous vehicles, or autonomy in general. They're probably the best. They're the best autonomy, spatial intelligence business, physical AI business in the world. Then you've got Optimus. So you've got humanoids. They've just shut down the Model S and the Model X production lines forever to start producing Optimus. Now, how does someone like Figure AI compete with the production lines of Tesla that are already in place that just get retooled for Optimus?
They can't. And it must also be a bet on the political environment because, they've talked about for ages, or at least, pre-2026, the idea of big tech being too big and breaking it up. And you had folks in office that were on a mission to do that, to break up big tech companies. They talked about Google, having to carve out Chrome or search. And so this company would be the size of Google, if not bigger, if they all joined together. And so they're obviously also banking on the political environment to be pro big tech and not go in and bar this and then actually end up breaking it up, because that would be really disruptive.
I think so much of it, though, is so frontier. It takes the government a long time to realize a monopoly has happened. And it usually takes Google, no one cares about the search market, but they do care about the advertising market. So, the Murdochs complained that Meta and Google took the whole advertising market from traditional journalism and other forms of advertising. That's when the government gets lobbied and starts getting involved and tries to break people up. But I think once you're talking about space, humanoids, social media and AI, I don't know if the government's sort of caught up, or if they can keep up with where this is at.
The government might not be, but X is, and the Elon haters would be. And I think up until recently, there was very sort of left-wing people in charge of breaking up big companies. So I just think that this kind of thing 12 months ago wouldn't have flown. Like they would have seen this on X, all the rumors happening, and then the whole anti-Elon thing coming out. So I agree, like people wouldn't have known whether or not it was going to be a monopoly, but they would have just said, billionaire, too much power, stop.
I think they're too busy protesting every week about nonsense. I don't even imagine if you're at the protest, right? You've got your sign that you change nations flags on it every 2 weeks, depending on whatever. They've got they've got Central and South America countries on there. They've got Middle Eastern countries. They've got Eastern European countries. They flip, like, you got to flip it every week, right? And then you're out there and your hair's purple and all that kind of shit. And then you're like, oh, did you see that SpaceX and X merged? And now there's going to be a convergence of intelligence, hardware, rockets, and capturing as much energy from the sun as possible, and intergalactic travel. Change your flag, Put Mars
Just keep
on
up
it.
with the names. Yeah. I thought it was Twitter. Oh, X. Now it's XAI. Get me some more letters. They need a whiteboard instead to shove it out.
Crisis meeting. What about Mars? Stolen land. Anyway, so the Martians. When we start defending the Martians to get at Elon, that's when we know we've got a problem. But I don't know. Some of that might have to get cut out. We'll find out. But look, it is an interesting space. I agree with you downstream that there will be, obviously, Elon's always going to get looked at if he brings all this together, especially with Neuralink. That might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But in his theory, he's probably going to go, all right, it, I'm out. We're going to Mars. We're going to we're going to the moon. Like, that's sort of his plan, to be multi-planetary, and people won't be able to catch him. So, super interesting news. I think overall, he's been building this Elon ecosystem, and brands like Google have built them as well. But for one person to be building this and bringing it all together, what I do like as well is it gives the opportunity, because if they do get bought by Tesla, it gives the opportunity, I think, for, say, as an investor, like, who knows not much, you can just back him. It gives you a tool to just back him on the public market, and you go, I can put a percentage of my super or something, not financial advice, but just where you're like, now I get access to SpaceX X and everything he does, and I can just put money in and just leave it there for 10 years and enjoy the upside or downside of this. So really interesting space for people that just want to back him and don't have access to all these secondary markets and things like that.
Yeah, and just on that quickly, the interview you sent me of my man Toby Luckey at Shopify chatting with David Senra, he talked about, like, going public is actually a really good thing, because it democratizes access to something that only private investors have access to. And there's all these blockers to becoming a private investor. You have to have a certain amount of capital because of the regulations. And so he said that Shopify went public quite early. One, because it was the thing to do, but two, he just thought it was the right thing to do, to give people access to this and see what it's going to be valued at. And the problem at the moment with these private companies getting so big is the valuations are set by the VCs, and it feels like it's all just a massive setup to keep blowing up the valuation of private companies. And then you make it public, and then all of the retail investors buy in, you get your payday, and then the stock blows up because it's actually its value was inflated on the private market. And so I think that we're going to see a trend of some of these companies going public, unless all of the VCs think that the valuation needs to keep getting pumped up and pumped up and pumped up before they do. So I guess it's more of a philosophical thing about what is the fair thing to do when you get to a certain size. Maybe it is to allow access. The company is stable enough that retail investors should be able to invest without having these concerns that they're going to lose all their money. And so, it would be good if after this merger, if it goes, is that the idea that they've just merged, but it's pre them going to an IPO? They haven't confirmed the IPO yet, right?
They haven't confirmed it, but I think IPO does liquidate and give them access to capital which, they need a lot of capital to start building data centers in space and capturing solar energy and converting it into compute in space. So I think that the basis behind this is either to go public or to get consumed by Tesla, of which then they are public. I agree. And it also, as a punter, you get to choose. Like we spoke about Guzman and Gomez potentially being overvalued because they were something like 100 and something times multiple, and we said there must be AI in the avocado, and they dropped 50% after they eventually after their IPO. I think the other one that we have seen is like Figma. Like they go public after the Adobe thing got blocked, and they had a roaring start, which is basically a bunch of people buying off and a bunch of people from VC exiting and people buying him out. But now Figma's way down. And so the public gets to make a call and hold on, there's no value here. Look at like Claude might produce a Figma in the next 6 months. So yeah, no, very interesting space and pretty exciting to be able to, as a just retail investor, get involved with just saying, okay, I back that conglomerate, as potentially the Magnificent Seven or Magnificent Eight converge to be a top 3 or 4 with AI and robotics. And mate, I want to get into a thanks for watching. Couple of weeks ago, the All In podcast had this grand idea for the biggest companies in America that are currently facing a bit of a PR crisis to say, well, no one wants any data centers in their local area because they consume all our power, drive our prices up. And therefore they're running out of, they've got some real political headwinds in trying to build out data centers and build out, energy capture, nuclear, and all that thing. No one wants to live next to a data center or a nuclear reactor. And about 9 months ago, we put out there that Australia has more solar capacity per capita and more critical minerals that you need to build data centers and robots per capita than anywhere on the planet, which means everything you need, minerals and energy, to create compute and hardware, we are the lucky country. Once again, not through our own excellence. That's why they call Australia the lucky country, because it's all set up. We can't fail. Or maybe we could if we don't do anything about that, block everything, don't let anyone do anything. But what we put out there was, why don't we invite all the best mining companies in the world, all of the hyperscalers, the best energy companies in the world, NVIDIA, all the best compute layers, and say, come to our country, build and use our resources, and benefit the people of Australia by handing us free energy and free compute. Could you imagine what that would unlock for the average Australian household, and the kind of tailwinds that would give us in terms of innovation and almost building a utopian society? Because with free energy and compute, which means you have free intelligence, which is unbelievable for something like productivity, which has gone downhill for the last 10 years. So that was what we put out there. We didn't know if it was going to be popular or not, or if it was possible. But lo and behold, the Trump administration, and with the backing of the All In podcast and some serious thinkers over there, they are suggesting that they are putting a fund together where the Microsofts of the world and everyone get together, and instead of just building data centers and pissing everyone off, that their number one mission that they're calling their next, Oppenheimer style mission, the Manhattan Project or going to the moon, is to deliver free and abundant energy to the US, as long as we can put data centers and nuclear power plants and solar farms wherever we want.
Yep. Well, this might be the greatest thanks for watching yet. And Trump. I'm glad I think that we've rehashed it from last week, from the greatest episode ever. But I think that was a great recap, Scotty. And the other thing is, we've just got so much land compared to the people. Like, if America can do it and deliver free energy for that many people with, they're more resource constrained and land constrained, it should be a drop in the ocean for Australia to be able to do it. It should just be some good policy, right, to make this happen. And the thing that really scares me is Trump is such a deal maker. He would make a deal with anyone. What happens when China and the US actually realize that they're both really aligned on this, and they both decide, we would love some of that Australian resource, and we get taken over by one of them? Got no defense force. And I'm not saying that that's a likely outcome, but without being proactive and doing something like this and just being sitting ducks, it does feel like something that could happen. And that would be a really scary thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're not that dissimilar to Greenland. We just swap the temperature, right? That's pretty
Yeah.
much it. so I think you're right. It's about being proactive and recognizing, hey, why don't we come to the table and make some deals that benefit us, as opposed to being basically a pawn that could get thrown around by the biggest powers on Earth when they realize that their constraint is raw materials and solar capacity. And they look to us and they go, holy moly, look at that big shiny object down there in the South Pacific. So anyway, thank you for watching Trump and the All In Pod. Hopefully someone in the Australian government is listening and starts getting a bit more entrepreneurial. I actually noticed that your man Toby Lutke actually shared a similar post about what Canada could be, because Canada's got some similar metrics to us. But they have the same thing where they have real estate problems, they have inflationary problems, cost of living problems, and they also hate innovation like Australia does in Europe, where they have way too much regulation. So it's about potentially just unlocking that and resetting as a country about abundance and not about constraint, tall poppy syndrome, and stop thinking big and, start making everyone have the same wage and, give us everything for free. So look, we'll park that one there, but I think it was a really good thing that's moving forward in the States, and hopefully we can learn from them, because it would be 10 times harder for the US to pull it off than us based on the math, but just their decision logic and how they think about innovation will probably get them there before us. Mate, want to move on to tool of the week, and what did you have something for us here, or are we just going into what I was going to talk about?
Look, I all mine was the idea of going all in on tools like Claude, Cowork. I was starting to roll that out. I used the example before of being able to automate the browser. So my I guess my challenge to the listeners would be is think about the most time consuming or labor intensive process that you do in your business or in your role, and have a think about how you might try and automate that with Claude Cowork. That would be my challenge for tool of the week, because I think everyone would be quite surprised at what's possible.
Yes, agree. And look, mine is my tool of the week, and this could be, and we spoke about, with Jensen having his tokens per watt, or intelligence per unit of energy as his number one equation. And we spoke about more. So this podcast be delivering, value per minute in terms of takeaways, and this could be it from me. But look, I've had in 2026, one of my sort of New Year's resolutions is to always check, just have a trigger. Like if you were building an agent, have a trigger when I'm consuming, just to check, hey, am I consciously consuming here? Like I'll consciously consume a bottle of Shiraz with a big smile on my face, right? But if I'm scrolling a social media platform, am I just unconsciously consuming, which I would call almost gluttony. There's a bunch of input without any output, and that's the equivalent of just eating junk food and lying down. Or am I building, which can still be consumption, so it can still be input, but similar to eating good food and then exercising, you're applying an action with an output. And that makes it, to me, that means you're building a better body, or are you consuming, you're turning consuming into leveraged knowledge and then executing with that leveraged knowledge. So, which brings us to my little workflow tool or app potentially called Consumacute. Now we're going to work on the name, but it's, as you would expect, it's turning consumption into execution. And what it is just a little plugins and a couple of a little automation through Monday that I'm doing to basically make sure that when you're listening to that podcast or that audiobook or whatever your preferred consumption input is that you get the takeaways from that. You might be at the gym or driving, and it might have been just this thing, but what you've got to be careful of is just this slow release dopamine that we all get from listening or consuming something and feel like we're learning. But then where is that getting stored in memory that can actually be accessed to run as a filter through future decisions and future tasks that need to be completed? So what we're basically doing now, and we've spoken about Notebook LM and things, but basically now that if you listen to Apple Podcasts, the good news is that everything you've listened to is still stored. So all of your favorite pods, you can just go into played, and we'll go through on your favorite show, every episode you've ever listened to. There's 3 dots in the top right-hand corner. You can export that straight into ChatGPT, and it will ask you, what do you want me to do with this? And you can say, give me the takeaways from that episode. So this is retrospective now. So you haven't lost all that good you've listened to for the last 5 to 10 years. You then export that, you get the main takeaways, and then out of that, you can pick the ones that matter most to you, like which ones resonate. So if you're talking about the Founders podcast, there might be different things from Elon, just different things from James Dyson, different things from Toby Lutke that you really resonate with you, or you'd love to action or turn into a decision filter. From there, I've basically plugged in the monday.com tool, because that's my task management tool. And I just say, put this into my takeaways board. And what it does then is it sends it through to Monday, adds title from that podcast, takeaways, and then lists all the takeaways from that. Now, what you could say is it's glorified note-taking. But I think even if we don't, the thing about this next era of AI, to me, it's not about solving everything at once, right? Because we're not at the end of it, we're at the start of it. To me, it's about building up the training data to be ready for when the obvious tool is there to come in and basically almost, run a mental model or build you a personal AI model that all the things that you've ever wanted to listen to or take away are in there, and you can run your decisions in day-to-day life through it, and it's completely personalized and fine-tuned to you. So basically what I then have is you have all of the takeaways from all of the content you've ever listened to and you want to build takeaways from. You can then grab them and start putting them into AI and say, tell me what the reoccurring themes are. And then with Monday, because it's got all of my tasks and the history of myself and my whole business, I can then say, what should I be changing in this business? What are the areas of the business? Because this is basically the operating system of the business. What are the areas of the business where I'm not following this? What could I do tomorrow or today? Look at my calendar, and am I behaving in the ways that I'm setting myself up to based on what my takeaway from these things are? So it's just about, for me, turning this mindless consumption into active building and something that then you can execute on in the tool that you execute on during the day. So for other people, it'll be Notion and things like that. But it's a way that just not let that content consumption be wasted.
I love it. I'd say the next step, Scotty, you want to get like your emails plugged into that as well. You want to get the messages on Teams all plugged in, because you'd also say, based on how we're communicating with each other and how I'm responding and how I'm leading, is this aligned? And so it's all about getting as much context in as possible. It sounds like Monday's got a bunch of it, but you ideally want to get everything into that.
Yeah, I think what we're really talking about here is connecting your productive tools with your consumption tools, and just not letting this intelligence and these key pieces of logic escape you. And because at the moment, I think we live these separate lives of our consumption life and our productive life. And I think there's a convergence for everyone. Like everyone, there's a wellness, there's a longevity thing. And I think we're realizing that there's almost this singularity thing of, how am I living my best life at work and at home? And I just think there's something there. And the trigger should be like, am I doing something mindless at the moment, and can it be productive? Because then you get this guilt-free scrolling. Like when I'm on X, most of the time it's guilt-free because I'm bookmarking tech stuff for this pod. So it's turned something that was just a bit of a habit into something productive. And you can do the same thing with podcasts and things like that to not leave it by the wayside. So another one, mate, that was really cool was I actually just screenshotted all of my Audible books. Now, there was like 110 over the last 10 years. but then I got rid of all the fiction ones and I kept the non-fiction, got it down to about 45, screenshotted them and asked for the top 3 to 5 takeaways of every Audible book, and then asked it to merge all the things that were clear. I got it condensed down to 6, and then I got that 6 condensed into a sentence. And that sentence
Nice.
we're now running as like a law at work. It's around...
Can you read it
it's
out?
around... Yeah, I can. So, it is... Actually, probably going to do a little blog piece, I suppose, on this as well. But when was it? It was Sunday, when all good things happen. But basically, what we got it down to is a system is an incentive structure pointed at an outcome. But it also was basically saying that any outcome is just direction plus incentive plus a system compounded over time. And it really was, this is merging books from like Good to Great from Jim Collins, Thinking in Systems, economics books, Richard Feynman books on physics, and just really understanding that if you want an outcome, how you get there. And it's just basically making sure that, you know, the initial vision and direction and taste, a lot of people mention taste, but just getting that right, that's our job as a CEO. Then from there, we have to go, okay, if I'm going to design a system to go to this goal, I have to, while humans are involved, I have to have incentives, right? And I have to point incentives at that goal. And then so when you build the system, you're just building that incentive structure into a system and pointing it at the target. And then you can start to automate for the right result. So we're now using that formula to make sure we go from vision to traction in the business, to make sure that basically every system is pointing at the target, and that until the bots are doing it, the humans are incentivized to do their part of the system. So really interesting thing to break down 44 books over 10 years into that equation.
That's wild. It's so cool that you get to a single line on that, and then you can also go back. Like you don't have to just use that single sentence. You can also go back to extrapolating that back out. Like based on all these books that I've read, I'm currently thinking about HR or how I manage people. Based on the things that resonated with me, these audiobooks, how am I doing compared to what I said I was going to do? So you can hone into that single sentence to guide you as your North Star, but you can change the zoom on it. You can go back to, I want to go back down into the details of exactly how this person I admire manages this situation. I think that's the coolest thing about AI, the different levels that you can operate at.
Yeah, but once you can at least capture this data, you can then zoom in and out to those levels you were talking about. You've got the meta version of this, where if you wanted to do a HR thing, is my vision clear on it? Have I incentivized everyone correctly? And do we have a system-based approach to it? Or is it still up in the air and humans get to make calls all the time? But then, yeah, you can zoom out to what Toby Lutkey's 5 points on that thing are. So it's just around really capturing the data that matters to you and almost fine-tuning your own decision logic to something that's completely customized to you. So, and really that took me like 15 minutes to just add a couple of plugins to ChatGPT and set up one automation on a Monday board. So we're starting to get into some really simple, really cool tech, because I remember Notebook LM when we started this pod, under a year ago, was mind blowing just because it summarized YouTube clips.
Yeah.
So super fast paced, super interesting, but just I think one of the important things, there's going to be so much AI slop on the internet. So we want to recapture our attention and turn it into focus, I think, and just try not to do too much subconscious consumption. Like I said, if you're a drunk and you're having 4 bottles of wine a night, you don't even realize you're drinking, that's subconscious consumption. But if you and I are doing the greatest pod of all time with 1 bottle of Shiraz, that is conscious consumption.
That's deliberate.
We're building.
Yeah. I love it.
Mate, I think we both got a hard end. So good to finish on some takeaways for the team. Apologies to all the B2S fans that the greatest episode of all time appears lost. We might be able to dig it out of the archives when AI can replace the silent spots in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And get it to you later. But great to catch up again. Glad you're back in the States, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
Likewise, Scotty. Good to do it. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, mate.